Well, hi, everybody. Everybody having a good show so far? Yeah, pretty interesting stuff. So, couple of things you should notice about this panel. First of all, it's all ladies, which is pretty exciting. I write a column for Fast Company called Designing Women, and I've been doing this for many years with the hopes of really showcasing the power of women in the design industry. And these are two wonderful representatives. And both are Art Center graduates, so have a lot to say. So we're excited about that. So let me start off the conversation just with a provocative question. Is car the right terminology?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm not sure anymore. There's was a lot of many presentation even today talking about this is not a car, it's a mobility platform. And I 100% agree with that. That's where seems like we're going, and that's where all the customers knows and expect because technology is out there. And I would say I'm pretty excited to be part of in this industry at this moment where we are reinventing what car means and what we really can rethink the definition of it. So,
what do you think, Kimberly?
I completely agree with you. I think that we are in a pivotal moment of automotive transportation design. I think that we should play more on the word transportation. We're moving humans from point A to point B, and I feel that that's probably the most important thing that we have right now in the design studios. I think we need to think of it as a space where we can now enjoy our life a little bit more. We're going to be able to let the car do its thing with technology, and this will give us more opportunity to have some quality time possibly with our friends or our family.
Mm-hmm. So what does that mean from a design perspective? I mean, are we still going to be designing bumpers and headlights and dashboard? What does that mean? What happens? What does the car become?
I do believe there's still going to be an element of that because in the in-between, we're going to have a hybrid experience. So in the hybrid experience, we're still going to need all of those safety elements and the ability to take over and drive. As we move forward in the future, we'll see what happens. Something that we've started to talk about is the way urban planning is now being addressed globally. We think that the urban planning community needs to realize that transportation is going to be moving very quickly, and they have to then blend into each other to become one complete unit. And I think that's when we get to a point where we're not necessarily worried about a 5-mile-an-hour bumper, or if we're not necessarily worried about headlights constantly.
Right. I mean, I think about that we're going to be designing for two different type of vehicle from now on, where some of them will be shared autonomous mobilities, and some of them will be more of a personally owned mobility, autonomous mobility. And people would still like to express themselves by the products that they buy, and car is one of the biggest investment and product that you really want to express yourself with and identify yourself with, and this won't really change. But I think there will be a part of mobility system and the vehicles that's going to come out that will provide so many more experiences that we never experienced before, and this will be designed from, I would think, I'm an exterior designer, but I would think that it will be designed really from the experience and interior, and from to enhance that experience, we'll be designing exterior.
But it's really clear that the experience is absolutely changing, right? What we know as the experience, when we're all here, we're all looking at this amazing stuff, what does that mean? And how does that impact the urban planning and what's going on? I mean, this is a big change. This is not just
it's huge.
Autonomous cars driving around. This is something totally different. So from a design perspective, what do you look at?
I think when we talk about the relationship between urban planning and transportation design for the future, I think we really need to figure out how we are going to move through the city. Is it going to be on the surface? Is it going to be in a tunnel? If we look at that experience, that's really going to change how we design and shape the car inside and out. If we start stacking ourselves, or if we start doing a drone type of system, because I know Airbus is working on a vehicle that is going to take off of a chassis and be able to fly to a docking station, I think that all of those things need to be considered, because some people might be hesitant to get into a car that has a drone that's flying over the city, and some other people might be really hesitant to get into a tunnel and be in a tunnel for hours. So I think that all of this And all of the urban planning that's going into it really will drive how we look at connectivity in design.
And I think it will be unique for each cities and each countries, and in a metropolitan area, and some other areas.
So we'll start getting
somehow-
some specialization as
Right.
we move down.
That's-
And some of these experiments and things that they're doing in different cities with urban, what's happening there? So they're doing different things with different cities, right?
Yes.
Any standards, anything coming out of it, any findings?
There's a lot of fabulous things happening right now. We know with what was spoken about earlier today with Honda R&D. I almost said HRA because I used to work for them. And Ohio State, they're working on a smart mobility connectivity transport from Dublin, Ohio, out to Marysville. And they're going to be looking at new and smart technologies, as he was talking about. But then you have the flip side of the Baltic states, from Finland to Estonia, Lithuania, down to Poland, up to Germany. They're talking about a transportation system that would take you from water to land to underground in order to make that whole connectivity work. So there's so many things happening. Toronto's doing their own thing. My concern is that we're not talking about it as a global society. We're looking at all of these new fantastic things within city footprints, but we're not talking about it to then create a regulation that will help all of the industry. So I'm hoping that there will be a time when all of these new investigations will have their reports, and then they will be able to share the reports with each other, and then maybe go to something like the UN and figure out what we need to do globally.
Yeah, I think what's really exciting is that you see all this new emerging startups and tech companies investing in so much onto the mobility system, and seeing rideshare companies just rising from everywhere, and people getting used to using them, and there's now so many users. It seems like we're all trying to figure out where is the right way to go, and all together fighting to find a new future that, to find. And I think that every brand will have their own lifestyle that they sell, and their own technology that they're excel at, and this will be a very exciting time to find out where each companies belong to what type of experience that you're going to be delivering to people.
So you talk a lot about the word experience, right? And I think, if I could say it, the connotation that you're using is, it's not just something that's going to move you to a place. It's a place where it's your living room or it's your workstation. So from a design perspective, what do you begin to look at with the car?
I think we're already seeing the blend of the type of designers we're hiring within automotive design studios. Traditionally, we would hire an educated transportation designer to do transportation design. But I'm seeing more and more types of design specialists coming in. We've hired people from Google. We've hired people from interior design firms. I've seen people hired from product planning into design. So I think it depends on what the team is looking to accomplish. There's going to be a lot of new design concepts that are going to need somebody that thinks a whole well-rounded environment of design and not just one silo of design. And that's actually something we're talking about at school as well. How do we train the students to think more bridging and not so much in a silo system?
So how do you do that?
Yeah, well, we're letting more and more students cross-blend majors, and we're letting them go back and forth between study, which has been really, really interesting. I've had illustration majors in a three-dimensional class, and they've struggled the first couple weeks, but in the end, they've become some of the best designers for the final because they think in a different way.
And as you look forward in the future, tell me what your future looks like. What does the future look like?
Well, I see myself not driving to to work.
Will people get licenses anymore?
And well, I think personally, I love the way that I can be by myself in the car, and now we're going to be able to have work, play, and rest just all together in the car, and just I see that it's really going to enable people, and giving back time and space, and creating. I think car is going to be something really special that is computerized. You know, it's kind of like now you see your smartphone, and wow, I didn't expect to have this much of function in the phone before. But when you see the car, it's not a device that you carry around. It's the device that will carry you around, and it's going to be providing for you so many things, but it's also the space that you're going to be living in. So it's like having your private room, you know, like designing your private room somehow that can be anything that you want. So that's kind of like future that I look forward to.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that also we can look at times of travel as a way to think about how we design. I think that we have inner commuting things where we run to Target, and we'll have a shorter distance where we might just go across town, whether it be over the bridge to the other village or whatever the case is. And then we'll have those long distance travels where it's several hours to get from one state to the other. And I do believe that we can look at what that means in transportation. Is that something that is more like a bus system that you lock into your friend and you just run across town? Is that something that just flies you from one point to another? I think there's a lot of different ways to look at how we will do the future. And I do believe that the way we're looking at car design today will drastically change because of the purpose and the function.
And so let's talk a little bit about the reaction of the public. How you talked a little bit about, you know, will people get in drones and, you know, the concept of calling something a car that flies is just incongruous. Like it makes you, no, you know, flying vehicles are flying vehicles. So talk about the public. How do you, what's going to win over the public? What do you think is going to make them adopt that quickly to something?
I do believe right now we're all sort of fed up with the aspect of ground traffic. I think if you've been to Tokyo, if you've been in Los Angeles during the holiday traffic, I think you understand that we're all over it. So if there's a safe way that we know that a friend has tried, or that we're willing to try together,
Right.
that I think that we can do early adopting and get that to be more mass accepted. I do also believe that when comfort comes in play, when a brand has figured out what that person needs for their experience in that long distance time span that they might be in that capsule, that alone will drive people to change.
Yeah.
And we're lucky enough to have this youthful generation that is very used to adapting to things at a very rapid pace. So I do believe with them leading the older generations that will just sort of follow suit.
Right. I think the experience that you can have, you know, from what you can gain from adapting to the new technology like that, I think it will just change people's mind.
And how is that going to change our daily lives, our environment? How does that impact from an urban planning? What happens there?
I
on
mean,
the human side?
there's a lot of, like, what I'm always excited to hear about is like the mobile office and having like a hotel pod, you know, and those things. Like I do a lot of, like, I'm in a long distance marriage. and I travel a lot to other states, and it would be, you know, people just have a different type of, you know, expectation for, you know, when you can actually imagine living in LA and working in the Bay Area. And, you know, I think people will make a different decisions in their lives to, because they know that there is a transportation system out there that could support you for that.
I completely agree. If we look at urban planning right now, we have the density of city. All of the populations are around these core places. But I think that when we look at these new opportunities, whatever they might be, rail, sky, underground, water, that we can start living where we want to live and being able to experience life the way we want to experience. It doesn't have to necessarily be in that urban pod space just because it's closer to the office. Yeah.
So how are, switching a little bit, how are traditional car companies reacting to startups? How are startups interacting? What's going on how is this churning up the industry from a design perspective?
Go ahead.
Well, I see a lot of you know, this new mobility system. They're, you know, like what do you say, this memberships and subscription models, and there's a lot of things coming out. I'm now working in startup, so
So you worked for a traditional car company and now have gone
before,
and
yes,
now went to a
yes.
startup. What made you do that?
Really like the idea of being able to start from scratch and being able to work, defining what the experience is supposed to be, and working together with architect engineers and making a proportion model and designing the brand itself and styling the car. That really inspires all that product, and that's hard to get from working at an OEM. It's a lot, smaller chance there. But I think that there's, I see, I'm, getting all this media inputs that a lot of the OEMs now investing into the startups and of the rideshare startups and investigating what a gradual hybrid changes. And I think at design standpoint, creating a car that is good for ownership but also good for rideshare products is some place that I see where it's going. Yeah.
What do you think?
I totally agree with you. I also did your jump, but a couple years before you. I worked for a traditional automotive supplier that is small enough to actually flex quite a bit. The great thing that I was able to glean from working there is that they did more than just a car. Honda did multiple things of transportation. And it got me thinking, like, why can't I, as a designer, work on all of these projects? Why am I only working on a vehicle? So then when I had the opportunity to work at Tesla, I jumped at it because it was a pivotal time in my career. It's like either I stay at Honda and I'm here for the rest of my career, or I take the leap and maybe it's only 12 months, but at least I learned something. So in that time span, it was definitely, it's when you're in that work environment, it's like,
right.
Oh, what do you know how to do? Mm-hmm. Because we're going to make you do that.
Right.
It's not just the traditional
Wearing
thing that you were,
hats and
that you were educated in. You're sort of doing anything that's related to design. I think you probably
right.
did it too.
Right.
Like I did some exhibit design.
Wow.
I did some graphic design. So I think that that's the part about being in a startup. It's really exciting because as a designer, you're always wanting to make things better and you're always wanting to embrace design in every facet.
Yeah.
And there we got the opportunity to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Being able to, be really close to the branding and
Yeah.
marketing and just the whole team.
And listening to you both, it sounds like you work in this interdisciplinary world too now, very different from your old job. Is that something that you think is sustainable as these companies grow? And is that the future, working, like you said, you work with architects or you work with urban planners, or you're working with different people. Is that where the future is going? So design is going to look very different, right?
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that design as a profession is going to be someone that is a jack of all trades. It's not so much that you are looking at one avenue and that's all you're going to stick to the whole career. What I was really excited about in the startup, and probably you as well, is that we did get to talk to the city. We got to talk to people at a mall. It was like we were actually spokespeople as well. So I thought it was really interesting that we were able to give all of those opportunities being just a designer.
Right. I mean, just having, catching up to the more meeting I get to do with engineer and also financial people, marketing people, it just makes the product stronger. And I think sometimes you just don't get enough of that to make the product right. And just being able to have that type of discussion, like from your point of view, from your team's point of view, what is what is most important in this subject, it just drives, it makes you, like everyone become a designer at the same time, everyone become an engineer at the same time. And
yes.
Yeah, and I think it's the more, because we're
totally
facing this new changes, to create a new future product, I think this is a necessary process somehow. Yeah.
I agree. Even one of my favorite purchasing managers is actually here. I just saw him just a moment ago, and I still have such a bond with him because he understood what I needed from design, and then he taught me what we were up against regarding pricing and cost. So that made me a better designer, and it made him a better purchasing agent, and therefore we had a better team.
Right.
And that's something I don't think I would get to do in a big, huge company of silos of departments. So it was really interesting.
Which seems, because, when we look at transportation in the future, it is very interdisciplinary. It isn't siloed. So that just seems like something that is going to be evolving and changing. And it does have to start with the education process, right? So starting at where you are at Art Center and making sure that you are doing this from an interdisciplinary is going to be, I think, really important as we look to the future, because otherwise you can't just be good at one thing anymore.
Right.
That's what it seems like. It's become far more, it's complicated on one hand, but on the other hand, as a designer, it's a piece of the puzzle, and the more pieces of the puzzle that you get, the better you get at designing something.
Right.
I'm also think that we need the diversity factor.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're going to be able to get to the place we need to get to if we're just looking at one typical situation. I think if we can get more diversity of culture and age and gender and outlook, that I think that we're going to get to a better place globally in regards, and probably a faster place than where we are currently. We all need to embrace that in order to do and innovate and work as a team.
Right.
So what are some suggestions you would again give to people out there that are working in that? What has to happen? Do they need to walk across the aisle and go just talk to different people? Like, what are some tips we want to give people?
I definitely think you're right. I think you actually need to get out of your cubicle or get out of your building and walk across and talk to someone and say hello and introduce yourself. Don't be frustrated that somebody is shooting down an idea. Go find out what you can do together. Find out what the issue is on both ends, and then try to find out the middle, and we innovate faster. I do think that there's a lot to be said for teamwork, teamwork, teamwork.
Right. I think we mentioned a little bit that when we work as a different disciplines, work as a small group, I think there's certain synergy that happens, and I see even in a big team of people, if the project is divided into a little bit of a startup style, maybe working environment, I think it will create something like some kind of a new synergy that will make everyone to speak up and just, I think it will be interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like ultimately the product will be better, right? Which is what we're looking at, especially when we're designing something that doesn't exist. There really isn't.
Correct.
When you're looking at where the world is going and what we're talking about, you're designing something that there is no really footprint for. There isn't like a manual. This is what's happened.
And not to get hung up on the brand that you currently are. So we've been around for 100 years, and we've always done this four-wheel thing. Don't get hung up on that. Realize that you've got a lot of innovation that has happened over those 100 years that you can use in a different way. And I think that that's something that we all need to be hyper aware of. It's hard to accept the innovation. It's really difficult at times to be like, oh, we'll never be able to do that. But you'd be surprised when you get everybody in the room and it's all hands on deck and you've only got 6 weeks to do it, what happens?
Right.
You talked, you were talking a little bit about bringing all these people together. Ultimately, you get a better product. You're looking towards the future. What's the downside?
The downside is trial and error, I think. I think with everything, you're always going to have something that's going to fail. But as we are all told by our parents, failure is a teaching opportunity. So definitely realize that even if you did fail, you learned something from it, and then pick yourself up and try again. We have to deal with finances when it comes to big global corporations, but I think if we don't do this, then the company may or may not survive. We have to really think about innovation.
Right. To me, it just came up to, more kind of an immediate downside. Because we're still not in a world of autonomous, everything is fully autonomous, and we still have to fit into all the regulations and pedestrian protection and feasibility. And on top of that, now we have a lot more sensors to package on. So it's going to be difficult to make the car look nice. But I mean, there's like all this process of a little bit of ugliness, and you know, and this will be, you know, hopefully getting into some beautiful future.
Yeah, but it also sounds like, because the paradigm is shifting of what it is, what's ugly anymore too. And at some point, right?
Yep.
If the user, it's about the user and it's about comfort and stuff, it's interesting what becomes a piece of beauty.
Correct.
You know, we use a rectangle phone right now, you know.
Exactly.
You know what I
Correct.
mean? It's,
Yeah, completely.
we look at that from a beauty perspective.
Yeah.
So we're almost out of time. We just went so fast. Words of wisdom. What do you want to leave people about design and designing these transportation experiences?
Don't say no just because it scares you. Definitely take the opportunity, take the breath, take the jump, and try it. I think that we are definitely in a stage where we can innovate to a very positive outcome. I think that there's a lot of people that are working on similar things, and we're all going to learn from each other.
I just want to encourage everyone, because we're living in a stage where it's we're in an industry all together, you know, in a very exciting time, and you know, I just want everyone to just do something completely different, and we all fail and success, and you know, succeed, and we'll figure out what's the right way to go. But yeah.
Well, the future is happening. Change is happening as we sit here. So it sounds like, listening to you, it's better to kind of make it the change happen, get in front of it, as opposed to being behind it and chasing it.
Yep.
And it sounds like, from, again, what you both have been working on, it's pretty amazing. You're really looking towards the future. So thank you both for coming up here and talking.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, everybody.